Yeah.
And we don't build that muscle of courage all at once. I'd never recommend someone start with the biggest issue you have with your partner,
Yeah.
because that is going to be the most challenging. But just like a muscle you would train in the gym,
Yeah.
we start small. It should never be you versus your partner.
Yeah.
It's you and your partner versus the issue. When you can look at it like that, then you can really come to resolution.
Hi, everyone. Juliet Peters, the host of Her Table, Her Rules. And I am really grateful today to have Melissa Nanavati here. And we're going to talk about something we haven't really talked about since we started the podcast, which is relationships. And it's such an important topic. So I'm really, really grateful that you're here.
Truly honored to be here and to get to speak with you.
I know. This is awesome. So first of all, we're going to talk, because we always start talking about your business a little bit. So your business has become relationships. How did you get there from what was a really traditional kind of career to begin with? Yeah.
So I previously was a Fortune 100 consultant. I was a textbook author in the marketing space. And a lot of the work that I did was working directly with CEOs. And through that process, I actually came to learn a lot about their intimate relationships. I was ghostwriting for a lot of high-level CEOs and seeing kind of the best case scenarios and some of the more challenging scenarios. And it happened really organically when I first got together with my husband, because we had a very unique start to our relationship. He was preparing to be the first person to attempt to ski across Antarctica.
Wow.
Completely alone. And in that process, not only did we have to raise $1.1 million just for the expedition, but we were traveling 80% of the year, and we were both running our businesses independently. And what we discovered was we were getting more questions about our relationship and how we were making it work than even his expedition. So it happened really organically for me. And it was kind of the culmination of everything that I loved and was passionate about. Passionate about human connection, negotiation, and the science of connection, our neuroscience, biology. These were my hobbies that ended up turning into my profession and truly my soul's calling.
Yeah, which is really interesting. You had mentioned that you kind of, your sideline was biohacking.
Yes.
So
that's my hobby, if you will.
Yeah.
And I got really into everything around health and optimizing not only the physical, but the mental. I even attended a retreat put on by Dave Asprey, who's considered the father of biohacking, his 40 years of Zen neurofeedback program. And it was through that I got really excited to learn about how do our brains work? What's being activated when we're in a relationship, when we're having hard conversations, and how do we down-regulate ourselves to be more effective in those conversations, especially the ones at home?
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second, because I think, one of the things that I'm fascinated by with just kind of the work that I've seen you do and the, some of the tips, and I think you're in the middle of writing a book, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think what I really love is how you're applying these neuroscience principles to finding the right partner and then continuing to have sort of this additional best life besides being really high performance right on your job front. You're really applying those principles into how do I make that work for my at-home relationship. So tell me a little bit about some of the most critical neuroscience principles that you need to really focus on if you want to have the best life ever with respect to a relationship.
That's a fantastic question. And so much of the neuroscience that I'm excited about is about how do we really make sure we're acting from a place that is our prefrontal cortex, which is all about the decision-making part of our brain, versus being driven exclusively by our fight or flight response, which is the amygdala.
Right.
And there's very specific things you can do, not only in the dating process, but as you're in relationship and as you're having hard conversations to make sure that's the space you're acting from. For example, let's say you're in kind of a weird place with your relationship and it seems that every question is tense. Mm-hmm. What we do is rather than over-explaining why we want our partner to do something, we simply ask a question. Mm-hmm. For example, if you want to build more of a routine of let's spend time together at the end of the day, let's go for a walk. Simply just the invitation without the explanation of, oh, I've been feeling disconnected and this, that, and the other, puts someone in the prefrontal cortex. Because when we ask someone a question, our brains have to answer.
Yeah.
And so we're getting out of that fight or flight response because we're simply asking a question and letting it be simple. The other thing is making sure that when we go into having hard conversations, especially with our partner, making sure that they know that you're about to have a hard conversation and saying, hey, when is a good time for us to discuss something small? Because if you frame it as, I've got this big issue that's been really bothering me, you're already getting them into this fight or flight response. But if you can give them time to prepare and get regulated yourself, we are mirrors. So we have mirror neurons in our brains. So the more regulated we show up to conversations or even to dating, the more calm we can get ourselves, that has a ripple effect on the person in front of us.
Let's talk for a second, because so many of the people that watch this are women. So let's be real about some of the things that women often do in a relationship. So we are wired, right, to keep going, to keep working, to push through. But what builds is resentment. Right. So then you have like a little flash point and out comes 15 years of bottled up frustration. Right. Yeah. Which I can imagine is not a great thing when you're trying to have an optimized relationship. So tell me about how specifically as women, we don't hold all of that in a container thinking we're doing the right thing. And then we sort of dump it out at the closest conversation that becomes a little bit negative.
So I first want to back up and say that women and men's brains are actually wired differently.
Yeah.
From birth, they've actually done studies that if you look in the womb, you can tell if it's male or female based on a scan of their brain. Because women's brains have more overdeveloped prefrontal cortex. It's bigger than men's. Especially after we have children, we have even more neural connections between our right and left hemisphere. Thus, we are able to hold more in our minds and we can see all the things that need to get done. This is where you start to think about either emotional labor or just keeping the task lists within our brains. So the first thing I always encourage specifically women to remember is this is your superpower. We have superpowers. And when you can start to look at your ability to notice and hold everything as a superpower versus something that your partner should just inherently do if your partner is male, that is the first step.
Yeah.
The second is to understand that people can only rise to the occasion that we give them the opportunity to.
Yeah.
So when we are not consistently communicating about what specific actions we would like our partner to take in order for us to feel supported, that's where resentment begins to build. And it really kind of comes back to what I like to call the 4 types of relational courage. And if we are not practicing these consistently in our relationship, this is where resentment builds.
Yeah.
The first is the courage to be vulnerable, openly sharing our internal world. The second is the courage to ask for what our partner needs.
Okay, stop there for a second, because unpack that a little bit for me.
So asking on a weekly basis, one of the core tips I give to any couples that I work with, or even individuals before you get into a relationship, is to get in the habit of every single week, not only asking what your partner needs from you that week, one specific action. Because if you ask it generically, something like, hey, what can I do for you? They'll say support.
Right.
What does support mean?
Yeah.
It means something different to everyone.
Yeah.
Maybe support means picking the kids up from school.
Yeah.
Maybe support means taking out the trash. It could be something very simple. But getting in the habit of doing that is what allows you both to feel supported. And then in return, which is also the third type of relational courage, is to ask for what you need specifically. And I'll give a great example. So I recently worked with a couple who the wife felt really frustrated because she didn't feel like the husband was making her and the daughter feel protected when they traveled.
Oh, interesting.
And so I asked, what does protected mean to you?
Yeah.
And she had a couple of different items. I said, pick one. What is one thing he could do the next time you travel that could make you feel more protected? And you'll never guess what it was.
No, because this is a fascinating, even that framework is fascinating. So
she wanted him to keep track of their daughter's roller bag when they went through the airport. Very simple.
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing was she had a laundry list of things she wanted him to do. But I said, just start with that and see how the next time goes.
Yeah.
They reached back out to me a week later and she said, because they travel a lot for work.
Yeah.
And that alone made her feel safer. Usually when there's this buildup of resentment, one simple action can start to soften the whole experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And
Melissa.
specificity is key.
Yeah.
And we often don't even have that clarity. What do we really mean when we say we want our partner to make us feel supported? So spending some time developing that inner clarity of what is one or two specific things
Yeah.
that our partner could do that week.
Yeah.
Because if it's on this long timeline, people forget.
Yeah.
And it's not out of malice, but that is something that tends to build resentment.
That's very interesting. I'm processing that. We were talking before we sat down, and I've been married a really, really, really long time,
Which is beautiful.
It is. But one of the things that I love about what you're saying is there's a huge amount of intentionality that you're bringing into the area of how you sort of develop a great relationship. And I, sometimes I think boy, am I lucky that I didn't know all those stuff and stumbled my way through it. Right.
And you discovered those to have the kind of
Right.
marriage that you had. It's not that you weren't doing those things. And that's where the fourth type of relational courage is the courage to bring up issues to be addressed in the relationship.
Yeah.
And you yourself said that this is key, right?
Yes,
and that's an
absolutely.
absolutely paramount in relationship. And that was one of the commitments my husband and I even made early on, is to never let an issue fester.
Yeah.
And to your point of that resentment, that's really essential.
Yeah.
And we don't build that muscle of courage all at once. I'd never recommend someone start with the biggest issue you have with your partner,
Yeah.
because that is going to be the most challenging. But just like a muscle you would train in the gym,
Yeah.
we start small.
Yeah.
Maybe the issue is over who handles trash.
Yeah.
Right. Very simple, but starting incrementally building that muscle. And so that you both can see that you are looking for solutions as a team. It should never be you versus your partner.
Yeah.
It's you and your partner versus the issue. When you can look at it like that, then you can really come to resolution.
That is a major piece of wisdom, I think. It's you and your partner against the issue.
Even if it's a habit you want them to change.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I think, we touched a little bit about, so for me, if anyone ever asks me what's the secret to a long marriage, first jokingly, I say alcohol, but that's really not it.
But a sense of play.
It sounds funny.
But you would say a sense of play.
So I would say, my husband will always say friendship, right?
Yes.
Like at the core, you have to be the other person's bestie and want to spend time with them above anyone else, right? And that is something that kind of develops over time. But I think the real key is humor.
Yes.
I mean, I do think that you have to have a playfulness, a levity, because, the world is tough. And a lot of times as a family, you face really difficult challenges, people's illnesses, deaths, all of these things that can really fracture a relationship. It's super important that you build that fortress before the waves and the wind, right, and the driving rain hit, because otherwise you really don't have a chance.
And it's funny you say that, because even in the book that you mentioned that I'm working on with my husband, the manuscript is close, but we're still a year out from publishing. It's called Peak Performance Love, and there's really 4 core pillars. One of them is play.
Yeah.
Play, courage, presence, and curiosity.
Yeah.
Because if you stop dating your partner, if you stop looking at them as someone to be explored and to understand their internal world, that's where you see the quiet quitting that they talk about in the work world, in the relationship.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that when I was sort of reading up on you and listening to all the other things you've done, I was really fascinated with how really these worlds of business and being a high performer and succeeding in business at a high level really kind of marry with the relationship side, right? That intentionality, that putting the effort in. I think you said at one point you wouldn't show up without a goal set, right? On the business side.
Exactly.
So why would you not do that, right, on the relationship side?
And I think that's specifically even more important for hard conversations.
Yeah.
Knowing the outcome that you want before you get into the conversation is essential. Do you want deeper connection? Do you want to feel more supported? Or do you want to break some sort of pattern that you're in your relationship in that's destructive, that's not working? And if you can look at each and every one of those as an issue outside of your relationship to be solved, that's when you also take the other person off defense. Because if we're constantly looking at the other person as the problem, even if it's a behavior you want them to change, it's really hard to hear that feedback. Even the most evolved person is going to get defensive if you're using you always statements, right? Statements of permanence.
Yes.
So if you say something, you always leave your socks on the floor, you always do this, you're not giving that person the opportunity to change. Neuroscience actually shows that if you say, I can't do this versus I can't do this yet, it has a different response in the brain. Different parts of your brain light up. So when we give people the opportunity to rise to the occasion and say, hey, I know we haven't been doing this yet, but it's something I would like us to try.
Does that work with picking up your socks off the floor? Hey,
yes. It does.
That's what I want to know.
I always joke that, and this is where the playfulness is so important, but I always joke that you can tell where my husband has been in the house because there's a trail of husband. There's socks, there's a cabinet open, there's something else, but he is the most focused person you would ever meet. But the day to day, and that's where play comes in because we have so much rigidity, especially as high performers. I think there can be this mistake of applying the same level of perfectionism to our relationship and letting it be funny. Noticing your differences and adding some levity is so essential because that's when you get to realize that you're not with yourself. You're not dating yourself. That's not the goal. If it was, you wouldn't be with another person. And so when we can give people the room to make mistakes, to be a little different, but align on the things that really matter, that's when we start to close the energy leaks at home. And so we're not constantly running this loop in our brain of all the things that frustrate us.
Yeah.
It's to add play.
Super. I think that's really super important. Tell me about how you sort of decided to write the book that you're writing and really the whole idea of pivoting into this, what did you call it before we started?
Accidental. It was just, I think it happened. It was a coincidence, right? It was organic and it was an organic evolution. And the impetus of the book was I had read every relationship book I could get my hands on prior to meeting my husband. I'd actually been on over 100 first dates, which was quite the experience.
Talk about courage and stamina. I don't know. I don't know.
And people always ask, so how did you keep going on so many dates? And the answer is that I treated every date as an opportunity to practice a skill. Could I be a better listener? Could I ask better questions? My goal on every date was to have the best time I could have, regardless of who was in front of me. And
that's
that was
a great
the key.
mindset.
And it helped. And that's the growth mindset that all high performers already have in every other area of their lives. And what I discovered was in reading a lot of the literature, there was very few, if none, that really directly spoke to the experience of dating and relating as a high performer. And that's where I saw this is a need because the number of questions I was getting about my relationship before I'd even pivoted into this new career was unreal. I had people reaching out directly to me on Instagram. I had people reaching out that from the news organizations. Even the Economic Times did an interview for Akshay and I, my husband, about his Antarctic journey and ended up asking us more about our relationship. And to me, this was such an evident, clear need that that's where this was born out of. And so I went back to actually a lot of the CEOs I had worked with previously to interview them for this book. And interviewing people whose marriages have stood not only the test of time and allowed them to survive, but really thrive through job loss, scaling businesses, even having businesses that were global. And what was it? What were the common denominators that all of them were doing in their relationships? And so I started gathering this research, not only for my own knowledge, but with the idea of turning this into a book, because I had previously been a textbook author. I am research first. And I authored the first college textbook on social media marketing back in 2012. And the thing that people don't know about textbooks is that you have to cite every statement you make. So you're actually a researcher, compiling all the research. And that has been the approach to writing this manuscript is compiling the research, the stories of truly incredible humans whose marriages have been 40, 50 years, and people who've been together for shorter amounts of time, different family dynamics, adopted children, had children themselves, and seeing that there were common threads amongst all of them, which is how we created those 4 pillars of courage, curiosity, play, and presence. And so now distilling that down into what could be a tactical playbook for a high performer navigating that experience.
What about somebody who's kind of sitting in the audience right now that really wants a relationship, but they're super busy. They don't have enough time to focus on it. They're kissing a lot of frogs, right?
I did that too.
99 before you had your grade, before, first date out. But so what would you say to someone who really is looking for how to find the right person?
First, I would say it starts with clarity within. Create your list of 3 to 5, no more, core character values that you really need in a partner, core lifestyle values, and maybe 2 or 3 non-negotiables. So a couple of non-negotiables for me, I am somebody who quit drinking 7 years ago. So alcohol was a no-go for me, which also limited the scope of who I could potentially meet and marry as well. But that was a non-negotiable for me. And so really getting down to the things that are not superficial, but the things that make for a long-term relationship and getting that clarity. And the second is that this is an extreme limiting belief that you are too busy to find a partner, because you would never say that about another goal.
No,
and what I always recommend to people is to operationalize it. It doesn't have to be all consuming or take away from your career. Set aside 1 calendar block, 2 hours every week to go to a new event, or if you're using dating apps, to go through dating apps, scroll, message people, get yourself in new environments every single week, and be very clear about what you're looking for. So if you are going to these events, don't just connect with people you find attractive. Connect with like-minded people. And as you practice the skills of connection and build connections with them, then at some point you can tell that person, hey, I'm looking for someone. This is what I'm looking for. Do you know anyone? Because what I find is that we say we want these things and then we sit at home and we think they're magically going to walk through the door. But it doesn't take that much time. Go to a new event every single week that draws the kind of people that would be aligned for you. And that's actually even how I met my husband. I went to an event. I became friends with the organizer who had a partner. And I said to him, hey, I'm looking for a man. Not kidding. I said this to him after we built some relationship, because he asked me, he was like, how can I help you in your business? And I said, my business is great. I'm here and I'm looking for a man.
That's awesome.
Do you know any single eligible men?
Yeah.
And he ended up introducing me to my husband.
That's amazing.
And he tells this story to everyone now, because he said the reason he went out of his way to help me is because I had clarity of what I wanted. And I was direct about it. Because oftentimes we carry so much shame about being single. We carry shame about if we've been divorced before. We carry shame about the idea of wanting something that we don't have. But the only way you achieve goals in business is just like this. It's operationalizing it, it's getting clear, and it's taking consistent action.
You had me in calendar blocking when you said that. I read that on one of your things and I was like, oh, I love that.
There's no goal you don't. Right? There's not a single goal, professional, personal goal that you don't put in your calendar and schedule and make consistent time for. But what will happen is people will go on a few bad dates and then they'll take a big time away, a few months, and say, oh, there's no good men, women, whoever. And the reality is you're just not putting yourself in new environments often enough. You wouldn't give up looking for clients in your business.
That's
the same thing.
It's absolute.
It's the
everything
same
you're
mindset.
saying is absolutely true. I think people just don't apply it in that way to sort of the soft side of their life, which I love that you're bringing these skills over to the soft side of life, because the success keys are really the same.
It's identical.
You know,
you
how
already
to do
have
it
the blueprint.
Exactly. You know how to do it in your business, right?
But it's a different muscle.
It's a different muscle. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I would really like to have you back because I know there's so much more to talk about.
I would be honored.
At some point. And so thank you very much for being here today. That's it for this episode of Her Table, Her Rules. We'll see you next time.